The smell of burning corn still haunts me, but not for the reason you'd think. I'm standing in what used to be 40 acres of perfect heritage corn. Now it looks like a damn war zone. Charred stalks crunch under my boots like broken bones, and the acrid stench of gasoline mixed with smoke burns my throat. Security camera footage shows exactly who did this. Delilah Thornfield, my HOA president neighbor, strutting through my field at 2 a.m. with a gas can, grinning like she'd just solved world hunger. This lunatic thought she'd torched some weekend hobby farmer's cute corn maze. What she didn't realize, this adorable little garden project was federally insured as a heritage seed preservation program for $2.1 million. Yeah, Karen just committed agricultural terrorism on a multimillion-dollar research project. Whoopsie. What would you do if your neighbor burned your retirement dreams for sport? Drop a corn emoji if you're watching from farm country. Where exactly are you tuning in from tonight? Let me back up and tell you how I ended up in this nightmare. My name's Ezra Caldwell. I'm 52, and 6 months ago, I thought I'd found paradise. My eccentric uncle Silas left me 47 acres of prime Iowa farmland. The kind of black soil so rich it practically glows in moonlight. Earth that smells like rain and infinite possibility. I'd spent 23 years as an agricultural engineer for Dow Chemical, watching corporate suits turn farming into spreadsheet warfare. Endless meetings in sterile conference rooms that reeked of burnt coffee and shattered dreams. When my patent lawsuit settlement came through, let's just say it was enough to tell those bean counters exactly where they could plant their quarterly projections. My wife, Nora, a librarian who'd grown tired of suburban book clubs discussing 50 Shades of Absolutely Nothing, jumped at the chance to escape Chicago's concrete prison. Our teenage daughter, Iris, rolled her eyes but secretly loved having 47 acres where her TikToks wouldn't scandalize the neighbors. Uncle Silas had left behind treasure disguised as old man hoarding. His farmhouse was crammed with leather-bound journals that smelled like pipe tobacco and decades of accumulated wisdom, documenting 12 rare corn varieties he'd been preserving since the Carter administration: Cherokee Purple Flint, Painted Mountain, glass gem varieties with kernels that sparkled like scattered rainbow jewelry. When we first arrived, morning sunlight rolled over the fields like honey. Dew shimmered on the rows of young stalks. The air was thick with the promise of peace. For the first time in decades, I could breathe. No traffic. No bosses. No deadlines. Just wind, soil, and the hum of cicadas. Then we met Delilah Thornfield. Picture every HOA nightmare you've ever heard, then give her a clipboard, a white Range Rover, and a voice that could strip paint off a barn door. Delilah showed up our first week, uninvited, marching down the gravel path in high heels that definitely weren't made for dirt. She wore a crisp white blouse, hair pinned like she was hosting a real estate open house. "Mr. Caldwell," she said, smiling that sharp suburban smile, "I'm the president of the Thornfield Meadows Homeowners Association. We like to keep a certain standard around here." I remember glancing around, miles of open land, a few farmhouses, a gravel road, and this woman talking about standards. "You're standing on a working farm, not a cul-de-sac," I told her. She didn't blink. "Oh, we'll see about that. The HOA extends to the access road that runs by your property. So technically, your field borders our community." Technically. The word made my blood run cold. That day, she left me a thick packet of HOA regulations. Among the gems were lines like, "No visible agricultural equipment, no livestock sounds before 8 a.m., and my personal favorite, all visible vegetation must be kept below 24 inches. She'd just declared war on corn. Nora said to ignore her. "Bullies need an audience," she'd whispered, brushing my hand as we watched the sun set behind the barn. But I saw something in Delilah's eyes that night, something hungry. It wasn't about noise or property lines. It was about control. She wanted to own every inch of peace we'd found here. By July, the corn had grown tall enough to whisper secrets when the wind blew. And Delilah had started parking her Range Rover by the edge of our field, just sitting there, watching. I thought maybe she was waiting for me to confront her. Turns out, she was waiting for something much darker. Because 2 weeks later, I woke up to the sound of crackling flames. The first thing I smelled was smoke. Thick, oily, wrong. The kind that clings to your throat and whispers that something precious is dying. It was 2:47 a.m. when Nora shook me awake. "Ezra, the field," she gasped, voice trembling. By the time I stumbled outside, the horizon was on fire. My corn, my uncle's legacy, was glowing orange against the dark sky, flames dancing like devils across 40 acres of history. I could feel the heat from the porch. It licked my face as I ran barefoot through the wet grass, screaming my lungs raw. The wind turned traitor that night, pushing the blaze east, faster than I could pray. I remember the sound more than the sight. The dry crackle of stalks snapping. The hiss of sap boiling inside the plants. And underneath it all, the faint hum of laughter, or maybe memory playing tricks on me. By the time the volunteer fire crew from Maple Ridge arrived, it was over. 40 acres reduced to skeletal remains and ghost smoke curling toward a pale dawn. "Any idea how it started?" one of the firefighters asked. I pointed to a half-melted red gas can lying near the fence line. "Yeah," I said, voice hollow. "Somebody wanted me gone." The sheriff, a man named Dale Parson, showed up an hour later, sipping coffee like he'd seen this 1,000 times. He was kind enough, but there was that look, the city guy playing farmer look. He asked routine questions. "Anyone mad at you? Anyone trespassing lately?" I told him about Delilah. He wrote the name down slowly. "Delilah Thornfield, she's the HOA lady from Thornfield Meadows, right?" "Yeah. The same one who threatened to fine me for planting corn taller than her hedges." He sighed. "You got proof she was involved?" "Not yet," I said. "But I've got cameras." We pulled the footage later that morning. And there she was, 2:04 a.m., clear as daylight in night vision. Delilah Thornfield in a silk robe, hair tied up, carrying a damn gas can. She poured, lit a match, and stood there watching as the first line of fire caught. She smiled. Nora gasped, covering her mouth. "My God, Ezra, she's insane." I didn't say a word. I just watched that tiny flame spread until it swallowed everything I'd built. But here's the thing about people like Delilah, they don't burn things because they hate you. They burn them because they can. Because no one's ever stopped them before. By noon, the story had spread through the county like wildfire itself. Half the town came to gawk, taking photos, whispering about that city engineer who thought he could outsmart the HOA. Delilah even had the audacity to drive by in her SUV, window rolled down, sunglasses on, pretending not to see me standing there in the ashes. The sheriff told me they'd look into it. But Delilah's husband, Tom Thornfield, happened to be on the town council. You could practically feel the gears of justice grinding to a stop before they even started turning. That night, as I sat on the porch staring at the smoke still rising from my fields, Nora came out and placed her hand on my shoulder. "You can rebuild," she whispered. But I wasn't thinking about rebuilding. I was thinking about numbers. Because the insurance forms were still in my office, the ones labeling this property as part of a federally funded heritage preservation program. Every stalk, every seed, insured for $2.1 million under government protection. Delilah hadn't just burned corn. She'd committed a federal crime. That realization hit me like a lightning bolt cutting through the grief. My hands stopped shaking. My eyes cleared. For the first time since the fire, I smiled. "Let her think she won," I whispered. "Let her feel safe. Because the moment you set a man's life on fire, you better pray he doesn't rise from the ashes." 3 days after the fire, the smell still hung in the air, a thick, sour ghost that clung to everything it touched. You couldn't wash it off. Couldn't bury it. Every time the wind shifted, it brought back that same cruel perfume of gasoline and ash. I'd spent 2 nights replaying the footage of Delilah Thornfield lighting my fields. Over and over. Each time I caught a new detail, the smirk, the way she wiped her hands after tossing the match, the tiny spark of satisfaction in her eyes. The footage was proof, but around here, proof didn't mean justice. Not when your neighbor chaired the HOA and her husband sat on the zoning board. So, I went above them. Early Monday morning, I called an old contact from my days at Dow Chemical, Rachel Mendez, a USDA compliance officer who owed me a favor or two. I sent her the footage and the details of my crop insurance. Within hours, she called back, voice low but urgent. "Ezra, this isn't just arson," she said. "Your field was registered under a federal genetic preservation grant. That means she destroyed government property. You realize this is a federal crime, right?" "Good," I said, staring out over the scorched earth. "Let's make sure she realizes it too." By Wednesday morning, a pair of black SUVs rolled into Thornfield Meadows. The sight alone was worth every sleepless night. 2 agents in dark suits stepped out, badges flashing gold in the morning sun. They didn't even glance at my place. They went straight to Delilah's pristine white house, the one with matching shutters and the perfectly trimmed roses. From my porch, I could see it all through my binoculars. Delilah answered the door in her usual step-forward smile, hair flawless, pretending confusion. But the second they showed her the warrant, that smile cracked like glass. An hour later, they led her out in handcuffs. HOA royalty, escorted past her own neighbors, who peeked from behind their blinds like guilty ghosts. Tom Thornfield tried to follow the agents, shouting about misunderstandings and personal vendettas, but they ignored him. The town finally saw the queen stripped of her crown. But the satisfaction didn't last. Because that night, while I was sitting at my desk filling out damage reports, I heard a soft knock at the door. Sheriff Dale stood there, hat in hand, looking like he'd aged 10 years in one day. "Mind if I come in, Ezra?" I nodded, wary. He sighed and sat down. "I'm gonna shoot straight with you. The feds are taking over the case. They're treating it like eco-terrorism. You might think that's good news, but it's gonna get messy. Real messy." I leaned back, arms crossed. "Messy for who, Sheriff?" "For everyone. Thornfield's husband's already lawyering up. There's talk of civil countersuits, defamation, harassment, even trespassing claims. And the HOA board's meeting tomorrow to review your residency eligibility." I laughed out loud. "They're trying to evict me, after she burned my field?" "Yeah," he said quietly. "You rattled the wrong cage." That night, I didn't sleep. I just sat on the porch with a cup of black coffee and my laptop, scrolling through online articles about the fire. The story had gone viral, HOA president arrested for burning multimillion-dollar cornfield. My inbox was full of messages, reporters, farmers, lawyers, even a few strangers offering donations. But buried in the noise was one email that made my heart stop. It was from an anonymous sender. Subject: "You think Delilah acted alone?" Attached was a photo, a grainy still from what looked like a traffic cam. 3 nights before the fire. A black Range Rover. A man leaning into the passenger window, handing Delilah a small red gas can. Tom. Delilah's husband. My pulse slowed. The flames in my head reignited. This wasn't just her doing. It was them, both of them. And if the law was going to get tangled in politics, I'd make sure justice didn't. Because I wasn't done yet. Not even close. By the time the federal agents finished their questioning, Thornfield Meadows looked less like a neighborhood and more like a crime scene wrapped in white picket fences. HOA residents whispered in cul-de-sacs, clutching coffee mugs like lifelines, pretending not to stare when I drove by in my mud-splattered truck. But the truth? I wanted them to watch. Delilah's arrest had cracked their perfect world, but her husband, Tom Thornfield, was still walking free. And that anonymous photo of him handing her the gas can had turned everything inside me to ice. If the law wouldn't burn him, I would. Not with fire, with rules. The same ones they'd use to torment everyone around them. The trap started simple. I spent 2 weeks combing through HOA bylaws. Every clause, every hidden paragraph. And then, I found it, Article 9, Section C, all board members must maintain financial transparency and submit HOA expense reports quarterly. Perfect. See, Tom was the HOA's treasurer. And when I filed a public record request with the county clerk's office, the numbers didn't add up. Tens of thousands missing. Payments to shell maintenance companies that didn't exist. The Thornfields had been embezzling HOA dues for years. So I built my case, neat, quiet, patient. Like a man planting seeds. While the feds investigated Delilah's arson, I began planting a different kind of fire. Copies of HOA financial records mysteriously appeared in residents' mailboxes. Anonymous emails started circulating with subject lines like, "Where did our money go?" and "Ask Tom about the missing $42,000. It didn't take long for the panic to spread. At the next HOA meeting, I parked across the road, windows down, listening through a wireless mic I'd hidden under the podium days earlier. The recording caught everything, the shouting, the accusations, the sound of Tom Thornfield losing control of the room. "Those records are fake," he barked. "Then open the books, Tom," someone shouted back. When the noise died down, he slammed his fist on the table so hard the mic crackled. "You people don't understand. That money was for..." He stopped himself. Too late. The meeting ended in chaos, but by the next morning, the county ethics board had the recording. The dominoes started to fall faster than I expected. Bank accounts frozen. HOA under state audit. Delilah still under federal charges. Their empire of rules, collapsing one policy at a time. But revenge isn't satisfying unless you look your enemy in the eye. So, one morning, I drove to the Thornfields' house. The same driveway where she'd once strutted in high heels, clipboard in hand, telling me my farm smell didn't meet neighborhood standards. Now the place looked stripped, lawn uncut, mailbox overflowing, for sale sign leaning crooked. Tom opened the door. His eyes were bloodshot, face pale. He looked smaller, somehow. "Ezra," he said, voice trembling. "You've ruined us." I didn't answer. Just handed him an envelope. Inside was a printed copy of their insurance claim, the one showing Delilah's act had destroyed federally insured crops worth $2.1 million. "You torched history for control," I said quietly. "Now history's cashing in." He tore the paper, but I didn't care. I turned, walked back toward my truck, and paused halfway. "You should tell your lawyer," I added, "the USDA's not done yet. They're adding conspiracy charges." Behind me, I heard him whisper something, maybe a prayer, maybe a curse. I didn't turn around. The sun was rising by then, golden light spilling across the blackened fields. For the first time since the fire, I saw green, tiny new shoots poking up through the ash. Life, stubborn as hell, refusing to die. Nora came out to meet me. She slipped her hand into mine, quiet but strong. "It's over?" she asked. I looked at the field. "Not yet," I said. "But it's close." Because the last part of my plan was still waiting, the one Delilah would never see coming. By the time autumn rolled around, the air had changed. The smell of smoke was gone, replaced by that earthy sweetness only October mornings bring, dew on soil, cool wind sweeping through stalks of reborn corn. My fields were alive again. But this time, they weren't just growing crops. They were growing closure. Delilah's trial was set for October 18 in Cedar County Courthouse. I remember the sunlight spilling through the courthouse windows that morning, warm and indifferent. The kind of light that doesn't care whose side it's on. Nora sat beside me in the gallery, fingers interlaced with mine, while rows of reporters filled the benches behind us. The whole town had come to see the fall of Thornfield royalty. When Delilah entered, the room went silent. Gone was the crisp white blouse and flawless hair. She looked hollow, dark circles under her eyes, the weight of her arrogance finally visible. But even in shackles, she carried herself like she was hosting another HOA meeting. Her lawyer tried everything, claimed stress, miscommunication, even unintentional property damage. But the prosecutor played the footage I'd captured. There she was, in night vision, gas can in hand, smile flickering in the glow of destruction. The jury didn't flinch. Then came the twist she hadn't expected. Because the prosecution introduced Tom Thornfield as a co-conspirator. He'd cracked under the financial investigation, confessed to helping plan the fire to drive me off the land and reclaim neighborhood control. When they cuffed him beside her, Delilah's expression broke completely. She turned toward him like she couldn't recognize the man she'd burned a life with. When the verdict came, it was almost anticlimactic. Guilty. Federal arson. Conspiracy. Destruction of protected agricultural property. Delilah sobbed as they read the sentence, 12 years in federal prison. Tom got 8. The HOA board dissolved within weeks. Their perfect world collapsed, house by house, policy by policy. But that's not where the story ends. A month later, I got a call from Rachel Mendez, the USDA officer. Ezra, she said, I've got some good news. The insurance claim cleared. Full amount, $2.1 million. But there's more. Because the program was classified as a heritage preservation project, the government wants to renew it under your supervision. Permanent stewardship. They want you to lead it. I couldn't speak for a moment. My throat tightened. I looked out at the field, rows of young corn glinting under the early sun, green and defiant. My uncle Silas's legacy had survived. That weekend, I hosted something I called the Harvest of Justice. Dozens of locals showed up, farmers, neighbors, even the ones who'd once whispered behind fences. We roasted corn over open fire pits, played old bluegrass tunes, and laughed until the night felt new again. At one point, Iris took my hand and led me to the field's edge. Dad, she said softly, you really grew this back from nothing. I looked at her, the firelight reflected in her eyes. Not from nothing, kiddo, I said. From ashes. Later that night, when the guests were gone and the fire burned low, I stood alone at the edge of the field. The corn rustled in the wind, whispering like it remembered everything, the fire, the pain, the rebirth. In the distance, the Thornfield's old house sat dark and abandoned. Grass had overtaken the driveway. A single, "For sale," sign hung crooked in the wind. I closed my eyes and smiled. Revenge hadn't just been about winning. It had been about restoring what was right. About reminding people like Delilah that nature, like truth, always finds its way back, stronger, wilder, unstoppable. The dawn light spilled across the horizon, touching every leaf of corn with gold. And for the first time in a long, long while, I felt peace.